Aloha. Welcome to Light Drama Action. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. And let's get to the content for today. Peace.
Before we begin, I want to offer a clear and firm warning. What you are about to hear contains graphic descriptions. Listener discretion is strongly advised. If you're joining us for the first time, full summaries for days 1 through 21 are available on the video tab of this channel, Morning Secrecy and Legal Jitters. The 22nd day of Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial began under a veil of suspense. Court was scheduled to resume at 9:30 a.m., but minutes ticked past with no jury in sight. Instead, Judge Arun Subramanian convened a closed-door meeting in his chambers with the key players, prosecutors Maurene Comey and Christy Slavic, defense attorneys Mark Agnifilo, Teny Geragos, Jason Driscoll, and even an attorney representing the witness known only as Jane. Was the conference about a controversial juror that prosecutors want to remove for dishonesty, as hinted the day before? Or was it about sensitive boundaries for Jane's remaining testimony? The hush only fueled the tension. When the attorneys finally re-emerged, their expressions were tight-lipped. The defense argued that without more detail made public about an upcoming incident in Jane's story, they couldn't effectively corroborate or challenge her account. Prosecutors countered that dragging such details into open court under the guise of public participation risked intimidating the witness, who testified under a pseudonym for her safety. As the courtroom doors opened to the public and the jury finally filed in, the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone sensed that after days of start and stop testimony, something pivotal was about to happen. Jane is a social media influencer by trade, stylish and camera ready, yet here she appears subdued, dressed modestly in a dark blouse. Only a delicate tremor in her voice and the redness around her eyes hint at the emotional toll of the past week. Judge Subramanian gives a polite nod toward the witness stand, signaling proceedings to continue. On the prosecution side, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maurene Comey straightens a stack of papers, exchanging a brief, encouraging glance with Jane. Comey, a composed figure in her late 30s with dark, shoulder-length hair, has been the government's lead questioner for many witnesses. Alongside her, Christy Slavic, a sharp-eyed litigator, adjusts her glasses and readies a binder of exhibits. Both prosecutors know the stakes. Jane's testimony is arguably the linchpin of their case, a case alleging that Combs wielded his power to entrap women into degrading freak-off sex sessions and silence them through manipulation and violence. Today, however, is the defense who continues to have the floor, and they are poised to attack Jane's credibility with every tool at their disposal. For the past 2 days, Geragos' cross-examination of Jane has been tense and combative, revealing jarring contradictions and intimate secrets. Now, as she resumes questioning, an uneasy hush falls over the spectators. The rap icon in Las Vegas. A noticeable shift occurs in the defense's questioning as Geragos consults her notes and then asks in an almost conversational tone, "Jane, you testified earlier about a night in Las Vegas involving a certain rap icon, correct?" A hush falls. This is new territory. The spectators straighten, and even Combs looks up sharply. Jane tenses in the witness chair. She did mention such a night in her direct testimony, but the details were kept vague due to a protective order. At a Las Vegas hotel in 2022, you and Mr. Combs hosted a special freak-off where a rap icon was present, a household name in the industry. A murmur runs through the gallery. Several jurors raise their eyebrows. Who could this rap icon be? The defense clearly knows, but the court has barred the name to protect Jane's identity and perhaps to avoid unproven tangents. Jane shifts uncomfortably. "Yes," she says cautiously, "someone well-known was there." Geragos pounces on the anonymity. "You won't say who?" Jane glances at Judge Subramanian, who interjects firmly, "The witness will not be naming the individual. Jurors, the identity is not necessary to your deliberations." His Honor's tone allows no argument. Geragos feigns compliance but uses what she can. She asks if the presence of that celebrity made the event more exciting for Jane. "No," Jane says flatly. Geragos probes, "Did Jane brag to friends afterward about partying with a rap legend?" Jane replies that she did not. That night was not a bragging matter. Her face darkens at the memory. It felt like a spectacle, she says quietly. I was there to perform for them. The implication is clear. Combs had shown her off in front of a peer, reducing her to an object in their elite playground. The defense, however, suggests another angle, that Jane was willingly rubbing shoulders with stars. Geragos points out that Jane's social media around that time showed her living luxuriously in Vegas. Jane counters that any posts were superficial gloss. The reality was far uglier. While jurors can't know the rap icon's name, they've caught the gist. Combs' influence drew even other celebrities into this dark realm, and Jane was caught in the middle. This revelation also hints at why the morning's private meeting was so lengthy. Likely, the defense wanted to name that celebrity to cast doubt on Jane's testimony or to suggest she sought clout, whereas the prosecution and Jane's attorney fought to keep the name sealed. Still, the jury's curiosity has been piqued, and a sense of a larger, murkier world surrounding Combs' freak-offs looms over the trial. For a moment, Combs himself looks perturbed. Perhaps involving an industry friend in his private decadence was a step further than he intended to be exposed. Suddenly, the tone turns even darker. Geragos adopts a grave expression and says, "Jane, I want to revisit what you described as a physical altercation in Los Angeles in April 2024. The courtroom collectively holds its breath. This is the incident many consider the most brutal of Jane's allegations. It's the fight that Jane previously testified nearly broke her. On direct examination earlier, Jane recounted a night of terror in June 2024 when Combs allegedly beat her for hours. Now, Geragos means to probe that story for inconsistencies. Carefully, Geragos begins, "You testified that on that night, you and Mr. Combs argued about him seeing another woman much younger than him. You admitted that you became angry and put your hands on Mr. Combs first, correct?" Jane's jaw tightens. "I pushed his head into a counter," she says, her voice low. The honesty of that admission that the first blow was hers hangs in the air. The defense clearly wants to show Jane as an aggressor too, not solely a victim. Encouraged, Geragos continues in a sympathetic lilt as if concerned for Jane's welfare. "You were very upset. You threw a candle and the glass object at him, didn't you?" Jane nods, eyes brimming again. "I did," she murmurs. She explains she was furious, convinced Combs had disrespected her on what was supposed to be a family trip by inviting another woman. "I lost my temper," she admits. Geragos presses, "You then locked yourself in a bedroom, then a closet, correct?" "Yes," Jane answers, describing how she fled into a walk-in closet to change clothes and escape the escalating fight. Her voice starts to quaver as she recalls the scene. Through the closet door, she heard Combs rampaging, his fury mounting. "He was kicking the door," she testifies, each word measured. "He broke it down." Some jurors flinch at the mental image of a door being kicked in. Geragos, walking a fine line, asks, after the door gave way, what happened? What happened next has already been recounted once in this trial, but even in repetition, it's harrowing. Jane steels herself and replies, "He grabbed me." With Geragos' prodding, she gets more specific. "Combs put me in a chokehold." Her hands unconsciously move to her throat as she speaks. "He lifted me up off the ground. I was on my tippy toes and I couldn't breathe," Jane says, voice cracking. The prosecution team exchange glances. Even they seem anguished hearing it again. Jane continues, "I managed to scratch at him and he let go. I ran, hiding behind a stone wall in the dark for nearly 2 hours in only her hastily donned clothes, barefoot and shaking with fear. Inside," she says, "Combs was hunting for her. She eventually crept back toward the house, hoping he'd gone, but he hadn't." At this point, Jane's breathing grows fast. She's reliving it. Geragos tries to keep control of the narrative, but Jane's momentum builds. She describes how Combs found her in the backyard. "He was upon me before I could run again. He kicked me in the back of my thigh, and I fell." She then delivers a chilling detail. "He started punching my head. He was yelling that I was trying to take him away from his family." One juror's mouth falls open in horror. Jane's voice is barely steady. "I said, 'No, I'm not. Please stop.' But he grabbed me by my arm and hair." She stops, choking on the words, tears flowing freely now. The courtroom is dead silent except for Jane's heaving breaths. Geragos interjects softly. "The police were never called, correct?" It's the only question she can muster that might help the defense. implying maybe it wasn't reported at the time. Jane confirms, no, I was too scared to call, and afterward he wouldn't let me. Instead, Jane says, she took photos of her injuries, golf ball sized welts on my forehead, a black eye, and confided in no one except perhaps the doctor. The absence of a police report doesn't mean it didn't happen. For the defense, this episode is a double-edged sword. Yes, Jane struck first, she admits it, but the ferocity of Combs' alleged response is hard to justify or mitigate. The jurors' faces show a mix of sympathy and shock. Some stare at Combs as if seeing him anew in light of this monstrous image. Judge Subramanian scans the room. Sensing the emotional impact, he announces a short recess to allow everyone to regroup. As the jury files out, Jane remains on the stand momentarily, visibly shaken and wiping her face. Christy Slavic, one of the prosecutors, approaches with a box of tissues and offers it to Jane with a reassuring pat on the shoulder. A small human gesture of comfort that the judge permits given the witness's state. Jane takes a deep breath, grounding herself. The day's testimony is nearly over, but not before the lawyers make a few final strategic moves. Legal sparring and strategic shifts. When the jurors return, the atmosphere is subdued. The defense team confers in hushed tones. They know Jane's harrowing account of the Los Angeles beating likely left a searing impression. Jane, she says, after that altercation, you stayed with Mr. Combs for several more months, correct? Yes, Jane replies, voice faint. Geragos nods. In fact, you noticed a change in him after November 2023, didn't you? She's alluding to a notable turning point. November 2023 was when Combs' longtime ex, R&B singer Cassie Ventura, filed a bombshell lawsuit accusing him of sexual abuse. A lawsuit that was settled in mere hours but sparked a criminal investigation leading to this trial. Jane agrees that around early 2024, Combs became more emotionally available, apologetic, and better at listening. He acted like he might actually change, Jane says, a hint of sorrow in her voice. She admits she felt more empowered in 2024 than earlier in their relationship because, for once, Combs appeared to fear losing her or facing consequences. Geragos seizes on this. He was trying to be a better partner, wasn't he? For a short time, yes. He even said he was sorry. A few times. The defense's subtle implication, Combs wasn't an unrepentant abuser. He had moments of contrition and genuine care. Perhaps they hope jurors might think, Combs did love Jane in his own flawed way and tried to make amends, and not exactly the profile of a cold-hearted trafficker. From the prosecution table, Maurene Comey listens carefully. She knows she will have the chance to redirect and contextualize this. Indeed, as Geragos wraps up her cross by thanking Jane, one can almost sense relief in the courtroom. The cross-examination has spanned multiple days, revealing intimate texts, conflicting emotions, and shockingly violent episodes. Jane looks exhausted, but she has remained intact. Now it's Comey's turn again. Rising slowly, the assistant U.S. attorney approaches the podium for redirect examination. Comey's style contrasts with Geragos' sharp-edged approach. Her demeanor is calm, methodical, but beneath it lies a quiet intensity. She begins with a gentle question. Jane, you were asked many things about what you said or didn't say to Mr. Combs. I want to clarify, why didn't you explicitly tell him you were uncomfortable or unhappy during those hotel nights? Jane musters her remaining strength. Because I was afraid, she answers, locking eyes briefly with a juror in the front row. Not that he'd break up with me, that wasn't it. I was afraid of his reaction, his agitation. She explains that if she displeased Combs, he could explode in anger or punish her by withdrawing affection or financial support. I was afraid of the options I'd be left with if I said no. Jane testifies firmly. She also adds, voice cracking, that walking away wasn't so simple. If I left, he'd blow up my phone, send people to find me. He'd be right back in my face, and I'd be right back in his love, she says, describing a cycle of breakups and makeups that made real escape feel impossible. Several jurors nod subtly. This explanation resonates, aligning with common patterns of abusive relationships. Comey moves on to the matter of the financial love contract. It's true he paid your rent, yes, the prosecutor says, But what would happen if you didn't fulfill his expectations? Jane responds, he threatened to cut me off any chance he got. She recounts the many times Combs reminded her about the roof over your head when pressuring her for freak-offs. In fact, Comey elicits testimony that Combs explicitly texted her on August 4, 2023, asking, "Are we getting freaky tonight? Look at that roof over your head and that pretty smile," effectively wielding her dependence on him as leverage for sex. A grim understanding settles across the jurors' faces. The $10,000 monthly stipend wasn't just generosity, it was a chain. Comey then revisits the affectionate texts and videos the defense showcased. "You wrote loving messages to Mr. Combs even after painful hotel nights, didn't you?" "Yes," Jane admits. "Because I loved him," she says simply. "I wanted to please him." She explains that after freak-offs, she often sent such texts hoping to reframe the experience as an act of love, to convince herself it was worth it if it kept him satisfied and calm. "I was adapting," she repeats, "telling myself what I needed to so I wouldn't fall apart." The courtroom is wrapped. Even the defense attorneys have momentarily dropped their aggressive postures. This is a woman describing a psychological trap, a trauma bond as an expert witness earlier described in general terms. Jane's redirect testimony dovetails with that expert's explanation that victims sometimes cling to their abusers in hope of the affection that intermittently comes. Comey doesn't need to overtly reference that, but the connection is there for jurors to draw. Jane, defense counsel asked about Mr. Combs being more apologetic after November 2023. She says, "What do you think was driving that change?" Jane gives a faint, mirthless laugh. "Cassie's lawsuit," she replies without hesitation. When his ex, Cassie, sued him and it became public, he panicked. There's an electric silence. The jurors know Cassie Ventura's name. She was the trial's first witness, testifying to very similar abuse. Jane continues, "He became very nice to me then. He said things like, 'I'm sorry if I hurt you,' or 'Tell me what you need, I'll do it.' But I felt it was because he was scared of more lawsuits or charges. It wasn't just for me." The prosecution has made their point. Combs' late-stage kindness was damage control, not genuine reformation. Comey ends her redirect on that note, thanking Jane for her courage. It's apparent that both sides have extracted what they needed from this witness. The defense got acknowledgments of consent and love. The prosecution reinforced that such consent was coerced and that love was twisted by fear. Aftermath. With redirect examination concluded, Judge Subramanian asks Jane if she has anything to add. She simply shakes her head, looking drained yet relieved. "That will be all. You may step down," the judge says kindly. It's just past noon. The defense team begins gathering their files, already strategizing their next move. Agnifilos's face is tight. Day 22 did not deliver a knockout blow to Jane's credibility as they might have hoped. If anything, her testimony under brutal cross-examination remained fundamentally intact and profoundly affecting. The defense will have to recalibrate. Jason Driscoll is already pulling up case law on his tablet, perhaps thinking ahead to motions or the eventual defense case. They know the government is close to resting. Comey indicated in court that they may conclude their presentation by next week after a couple more witnesses and a summary expert. The jury is then formally excused for the day with instructions not to discuss the case. They depart, many stealing one last glance at the door through which Jane left.